Welcome to Our Public Therapy, the show where we got problems and we don't know what to do about it. Maybe
But
you do.
we could talk about it and propose potential solutions. Bring light to issues, mainly our issues. But turns out people tend to have similar issues, so
Yeah.
we'll likely hit on things that resonate with other people, hopefully with you.
Yeah. And doesn't hurt to laugh at our problems.
Yeah.
But what is the problem that we're going into today?
In 2 words, I guess, or one compound word, think writer's block. But not just for writers. We're talking creative endeavors today. Creativity. It's an important part, I think, of life to get more out than what's already there, at least. That's how I think of it. It's right there in the word, create. Physics doesn't let you do that.
I disagree strongly. Some of the most creative people I know are scientists. And in fact, if you want somebody in a work of fiction to just be able to do whatever they want, you either make them a wizard and say magic, or make them a scientist and just say science.
Well, who was it that said magic is just science you don't understand? Or like any sufficiently advanced science is
Indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah, what is that from? I can't take credit for that quote.
I wish I knew the exact source. I do know it's a work from like the 1800s or something like that.
Okay.
Because it's been around a while. But it's some fancy smanchy stuff. But now, when you're talking about writer's block, you're talking about like stuff that's been going on with the Writers Guild, right? Because they just don't want to write anymore, so they block writing.
Exactly.
Right? That's how it works.
Writer's block is a organized protest of late night TV show writers who stand outside the studio in like a big block so that studio execs can't use the restroom.
But it's only around the NBC headquarters, so it's literally one block.
Oh, double meaning, yes.
One city block, they block it off, and they refuse to write, so they block it on a few areas.
Yeah.
Plus, writers are usually pretty liberal-leaning, meaning they could be communists, and so you get a communist writer's block.
Which is, I assume, better than an anarchist writer's block, which would be just like a book burning, maybe.
Yeah.
You can't write if
I
there's
think that's
nothing to
just
write
called
on.
like free-form poetry.
Anarchist writer's block.
It's like, I can only speak in phrase and rhyme. I do it now all of the time. That would be like an anarchist writer's block. Like, you're forced to be super rhythmatic and rhyme and do all this stuff. Okay. You're not able to be anarchist in your writing.
See, this isn't supposed to be a politics podcast, but we've already mentioned communists and anarchists. Why don't we just say other groups that we know and maybe can riff on one of those guys? Because I know that's like there's like a whole spectrum, right? And then we'll get back to being creative. But I want to dive into this. Is commies, anarchists? There's something called tankies, which is like kind of pro-authoritarianism. You know, imagine like tanks down a road, big marches,
Sure.
Military parades. They tend to have the position of America sucks. China and Russia aren't the best, but I mean, look at America. That's their default position.
Their default position is like, I want more tanks because America sucks.
Yes. Yeah, look at what North Korea is doing with all their tanks. We need to show strength or something.
So they're just like pro-totalitarianism? It's
Kind
like,
of.
Just
yeah.
give me a dictator
Yes.
to tell me what to do so that way I can stop thinking about it.
I'm so tired of these old crusty presidents. I just need one 50-year-old megalomaniac.
He doesn't even need to have real power. He just needs to look commanding.
Yeah, you would just wheel him out with a bunch of like stripes and ribbons on him. Maybe like a holster that he's never actually used.
A proper figurehead. Like, do you remember a few years ago there was a men's hair dye called Touch of Grey?
I think so. I'm envisioning the cover of the box with like a stubble beard, gray streaks in it. I might be thinking of another hair product. I mean, I could use it. I've got like at least 3 grays somewhere in this poof of dreads.
Yep, but the idea of touch of gray is like it'll make you look more distinguished. So, if you've ever seen like if a cartoon wants to show that like their character is aged, they'll sometimes give them gray hair, but just along like the lower part, right? So if this is the hairline, they'll just make it gray below the hairline. So do you kind of know what that's from, like, visually?
Yeah, I could imagine.
I imagine now that the only reason that exists is for those figurehead dictators. Make them seem distinguished. Like, we don't want them old and crusty like the U.S. senators. But we don't want them so young that people are going to be like, well, why is this guy not aging?
And why should I respect your totalitarianism?
Yep,
you're like 24.
Yep, so you need just a touch of gray.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that, especially comparing it to the like before and after pictures of presidents in their terms.
Oh,
that's
gosh.
not a touch of gray. That is a loss of almost all pigment. Like the Obama 8 years later is just night and day. He just looks haggard.
My question is, to what extent is that just like 8 years during like your middle, like when you're kind of exiting your middle age years? And what's just like the stress of like one of the craziest jobs in all of human history?
I would attribute more than half of it to stress. Like naturally, yeah, you're gonna just age and look older, but it's not just the hair, man. Your skin gets all wrinkled and old.
Your soul has depleted.
Yeah, your eyes are no longer hopeful. You're just ready for that book deal.
Yeah, speaking of book deal, what sort of creative endeavors did you want to get into?
Hey,
like, what are you talking about with, like, we got writers who are blocking stuff off. We got people who want to write, but what are your creative endeavors? What are you trying to talk about?
Well, when I think of creativity, kind of the reason I said physics doesn't get to do it is because energy can be neither created nor destroyed. But in the realm of thought, you could create more than, I guess, your system had initially.
I mean, you're getting a little too, like, meta over my head. So energy can't be created or destroyed.
But ideas can. That's my point.
All right.
I love it. And that's why I do get a kick out of whatever creative endeavors I'm undergoing. I guess right now, my most creative endeavor is creating combos for a fighting game. Technically, it is creativity because, I mean, you can always do the, just like look up a combo and then do the combo you saw online. Not as creative, but still very useful. I do that as well. But what I really enjoy is just going into the lab setting, you know, practice mode, pick your character. You've just got like a dummy character on the other side, and you just wail on them in some specific order of moves that works, hopefully, you know. And that process of going from like, I have no idea what this fighter does or how the moves are supposed to go together, and like slowly piecing it together, it's really fun. And then at the end of the process, not only have you created combos, it's generally what you call like just a string of button inputs that actually like link together. You've also created your own kind of play style. Like the way you play that character may be very distinct from the way someone else would. And I think that's the essence of creativity. It's like uniqueness. Because people won't create things the exact same way you do. They might do it better. I'm not saying everyone being different makes it the better outcome, but it is, in a way, the only way to get what you made, because it came from your kind of inner thinkings. And it might be, in the case of fighting games, it might be suboptimal. Like in theory, there's like a combo for a character that you just can't do better than. And so like eventually people find that, and like that's the optimal. you should probably just do that in at least certain situations. Whereas when you're just being creative independently, you're not really caring about whether this combo I found is the best possible combo. It's more
Well,
like,
yeah, you're talking about two different disciplines, right? So there's this thing that you've been learning since grade school, which is arithmetic. And there's this other thing they've been trying to teach you that makes no sense because it's very freeform, and that's writing and all the English grammar, like humanities stuff. And
participles.
yeah, and
I
the
remember that
arithmetic, the mathematics, they have a correct solution, right? So in science, you learn how this thing actually works. In math, you get to the right number. In the combos, it's like, yeah, there is something that is optimal, something that has the best amount of damage, the number that goes up. But that's not creative, that's math. That is finding what is mathematically most accurate. The reason that, like, papers are so hard to grade and why I, like, always was fighting my teachers, because, like, voice is subjective, and that was the biggest part of, like, rubrics for humanities papers. It's like, what's the voice in this paper?
Okay, refresh me. I remember tone and mood, but I do not remember voice.
Voice is this ambiguous thing that has no real meaning.
Okay.
What it's supposed to be is like, does it flow well? Can I get a sense of who you are, what you're trying to say? So voice is the idea that you're trying to convey coming through, as opposed to just being, something you copy and pasted from Google, right?
Yeah, like, can you hear the person
did you just
talking?
Yeah, did you just state the facts as they were, like a robot, or did you convey, like, your point as though you were speaking it? And yeah, there's other junk in there, but that's like, there's a voice to somebody, like, even doing something dumb like playing a video game. Sorry, gamers, but yeah, if you're just coming up with a random combo, it's fun, and it's dumb, and it's wonderful. And it is what it is. And a creative endeavor doesn't have to be productive.
Right. That's
just
the essence of it.
Yeah. And so it can actually be something that does not work at all. Like, I have no doubt there's a combo somewhere where it's all about just avoiding actually being in touch with somebody, because somebody maybe has moves that, like, close the distance, but they close the distance where you punch and get really close, and then the next move is to jump up really high, and then you punch in the sky and you go over them where their body was supposed to be, and you just keep on doing this combo so it looks really flashy, but because of the actual hitbox, you never end up touching the guy. Completely useless. The guy needs to do nothing in order to stand still, but it's creative.
Yeah, similarly, I've seen some combos with my main character, Shang Tsung, who's a zoner who just launches fireballs from full screen. I don't just play him like that, okay, before any potential game viewer is like, what a scrub. But that's his core mechanic. But with him, I've seen some combos online where it's just exclusively these ground projectiles. Like, in his old form, he does these ground skulls, and if they hit you, you get popped up into the air. So you could do another one and then hit him into the air, and then just loop that like 30, 40 times. It's ridiculous. It does no damage, because there's something in games called scaling, where, like, the subsequent hit does less than the last hit. So if you stack a bunch of moves that scale hard, it's basically like fractions. Like, the next one does half, and then that one does a quarter. By the end, your fireballs aren't even doing damage. It's just for fun. It just looks cool because you're popping them up in the air like 30 different times. It's that case.
Yeah,
it's
so
not
tell
useful.
me this. Where are you having more fun? Is it in creating something new, or is it in mastering something? Because the actual, like, mastering of something isn't necessarily creative. Like, you can argue that there's some refinement and some editing as you're making changes, but normally that's executing your craft, as opposed to the actual, definition of creation being building, like creating something new
Yeah,
out of nothing.
that's a great question.
Like, are you
Because
actually enjoying the creative process, or do you just like refining a skill? Because you were talking about like finding combos that other people have made, which is not a creative process for you. Instead, it's a very different kind of skill set that you're honing.
Well, I'll say this. Since I play it competitively,
Yeah.
I do want the combos that I create to at least be close to optimal. So I'm not doing those 30 fireball combos that like just waste time and do no damage. Because I do want to win ultimately. I just think it looks cool. So if I had to split like from the 100%, how much of my enjoyment comes from just the creative process and how much is the actual refining? It's probably 40% creativity. I am kind of a nerd for improving precision. Like, can I do this combo 9 out of 10 times?
I just want to point out that like you were giving a percentage for your amount of enjoyment. I think that tells you
that
all you need
says
to
it
know
all,
right there.
right?
Yep, but there are other areas of creativity where like you express stuff in different ways. Like I know you and our other roommate had been working on a couple of projects.
Right. I could talk about some very fun creative endeavors I like to share with roommate Sam. One of them is, well, we make several games. Like he's a big game nerd. We're kind of all into games in our own way. But Sam's is more like role play, board games, dice games, that kind of stuff. So we have been working for almost a year now on a dice game, basically. That is, I guess, a bit like a mix of like craps and blackjack. I guess there's like number you can't go over, and you roll multiple times, and it kind of adds up. And I've had a lot of fun. Just like the creative part of that is like, what are the rules supposed to be? What is the win condition? Like, how do you win? And is the way the game is now the best it could be? And I think in asking that question, you kind of have to create new ideas and change it, and then test with that new idea that the day before wasn't even in your mind at all. Like, it took discussing it with someone who knows kind of what you're going for to sometimes come to that new idea that just wasn't within you yet. So I guess that's an unsung aspect of creativity. Is like doing it with other creative people. It's very fun. Sometimes a lot better than just trying to like write on your own. Sometimes explaining what you want to write to someone can trigger some ideas of what you actually want to do in the future.
What? Like you're a verbal processor? Nah, that's not a thing.
Yeah, I'm more visual, I think. Or tactile, I think is also the word.
And I mean, just think about it in these terms. When two people get together and, as you phrased it, and do it, nothing's created, right? Nothing ever happens that, like, you create something out of nothing when two people do it.
Exactly. There was something before, and it just turned into something else that, I don't know, is alive and can cry.
Yeah? Something like that.
I mean, that's one way to be creative.
Yeah,
I don't think that's...
it depends on your definition of creative, right?
Yeah, I'm imagining...
You're creating without a doubt, but does that fit, like, the vibe that you were going for? And that's the whole, like, issue with, like, the humanities and when you're trying to talk about creativity, because it's like, well, yes and no. It just kind of depends on what you're feeling. And so, trying to figure out, like, how do you be creative when there are no wrong answers? Does that mean there are no right answers?
Yes. I think both of those statements are true in certain aspects. But when it comes to like grading a paper, I feel like there are some concrete things. It's not the same as grading maybe a math test, where I mean, let's start even with the math test. Like you could just go through and see did you get the right number or I don't know explanation. But there might also be follow-up points on like your line of reasoning, which is still a little more concrete than your voice. But even I've taken tests where you get the wrong answer, but your thought process was correct. So you might get like partial points. And I feel like
that just means that you were a certain percentage correct. It still meant that you did something the wrong way. You were wrong. Whereas for like the humanities and voice, it's like, well, you could be more right than you were. Like I think it was an episode of like The Big Bang Theory or something where a character said like, well, you can be wrong, but you can also be more wrong. For example, it is wrong to say that a tomato is a vegetable because it's technically a fruit, right? However, it's more wrong to say that a tomato is a metallic knife.
which is a good band name.
Yeah? Metallic knife?
No, tomato metallic.
I feel like that's just getting to be a mouthful. Like, you gotta have a dedicated fan base.
Or metallic tomato. That's better.
I mean, there are bands called Smashing Pumpkins and the Insane Clown Posse, so the name works, but you gotta have a dedicated, like, group of people who are willing to put up with that kind of, like, a long name.
And the fanboys are going to be called mates. But
Any reason?
the British sense.
Any reason?
Well, tomato, mate. It's just a shortening of tomato.
No, alright.
Yeah. And they're banned from Britain as well, so they use that word all the time.
Yep, though, let me throw this out there as far as creative, like, endeavors and why it's so hard to grade stuff. Where when I was writing a paper for school that's about, I don't know, the Civil War, there are certain historical facts that you have to hit. You need to show that you have an understanding of the content, etc., etc. And so that has a lot more concrete stuff that you can point to as far as, like, did you accomplish the goal that you set out?
But that might just get you like a B or C.
Exactly, because the way that you write it has a big factor as well. But the reason that, like, you're able to grade it more concretely is because you know what the goal is, right? My goal is to answer whatever the prompt is about the Civil War. How well did I answer that? Well, all my facts are there, so I answered it to some extent. But I wrote it very poorly, so I failed in that regard. That's how you can kind of judge and grade it. When I'm being creative, like me and my girlfriend are doing creative writing, like just short stories every week as just kind of like a fun thing. And it is so hard to like evaluate and grade yourself and like figure out, did I do a good job or does this just suck entirely? Because the goal isn't always very clear.
Could you give an example of the kind of prompt you might receive?
Alright, sure. So we just have this little book that you roll a die and it tells you this week you're going to have this character, this setting, and you need to incorporate this word or phrase. And for one of them, I was feeling kind of lazy and I wasn't feeling it, so I decided to just write something short. And so I had an elevator, a poet, and something with an odor. So I end up writing a poem about a guy trying to hide the fact that he let one rip as he was going to the roof of a building with a stinky plant. So he was a botanist and he kept on blaming it on the plant. And, you know, people on the elevator were buying it until it started to, like, make a squeaky sound. And he was still blaming the plant.
I think you did A+ job. That's very
well,
creative.
you haven't read it, and so
I've
for
heard
a concept, it works. But here's the point I'm bringing up. My goal was I'm not feeling it this week. I want to write something short that is able to be sufficient. And as far as that goes, A+ job. I think I accomplished that goal very well. The larger goal of me and my girlfriend entertaining ourselves with like writing short stories as a little hobby, probably less so, because did I do as good a job as I could? Did I let the fact that I wasn't feeling it let me be kind of lazy?
Did you learn anything?
Yep, and so how do you judge the quality of that there? And I mean, I got a laugh out at first, so that points in the right direction. But there isn't a single right answer, right? It's a spectrum of answers, right? You're sort of right here, you're sort of wrong here. You could always touch it up there. And that's why I think it's really hard for creative people in like hard sciences, because my like friends who do like paintings and different like traditional artsy things always say that they start a project and have a goal of where they can end it. And once they get there, there's always something they could touch up, something they could improve. They could like do a little bit better shading here. They could mix the colors a little bit better there. And at some point, they just gotta stop. So once they reach whatever that end point is, they just need to be able to tell themselves that they can stop. Because otherwise, you're always going to be able to refine and twist and make it better and better. Whereas in like the sciences, when you're a creative person and you find something that's right, then you're always questioning it, trying to find how you can improve it and make it something else and look at it in a different way, which, you know, allows for them to like have great discoveries, but also means that they're never going to be satisfied or be able to sit still with what they find.
We need those types of scientists. I think that there are people that are in math and science that are not very creative. They're just by the books, good with whatever number system they're used to, and that's it. Maybe they're like amazing coders, right? They can program whatever. You come to them and say, I need this, and then you go and do it. That type of person is incredibly useful, but that same type of person may not be able to do the other way around and say, this is what I need, and then go do it, right? Sometimes you need that idea to come from somewhere else. It could be at a job, or it could be a suggestion from a friend. I don't know. But the creative process there for like a mathy person, just in defense of the science nerds, because I am one, creativity does have a great place in math and science. Like, sure, there might be a right answer, but the way you get to that answer sometimes requires a very creative process. So one example I could drop, just because it's kind of in recent science news, is the Nobel Prize for Physics was awarded to a lab who did short laser pulses. So like short in time.
What? I thought that there was like some Korean lab that was gunning for it because of the room temperature superconductors.
Sadly, that did not pan out.
Ah, bummer.
LK99 was not proven to be what they claimed it was. So no Nobel for them. I don't even know. Yeah, I think you could be from any country. Maybe not any country. Imagine that. And the Nobel Prize for Physics goes to Young Suk Kim from North Korea.
Well,
has that ever happened? I don't think that's happened.
I don't know, but I think that they're probably like valid as long as they share that information, which probably they would not be allowed to by their country.
True.
And 2, I think they're just like disqualified from any Nobel Peace Prize.
Oh.
Just like as a standard, like, well,
I mean, we could change the name.
You know what you did.
know. Okay, well, anyway, that lab didn't pan out. But one lab that did, and this has been peer-reviewed, is they managed to make a laser pulse. Like, imagine I was just pointing a laser at this camera. Not a good idea. But if I was doing it, it would be on for as long as I'm holding the button, right? And so, like, the fastest you can push the button and let go, that's how long that pulse is. So when I'm talking about pulse duration, it's just how long is that laser on, and then, you know, when it goes off, that's the end of the period. So what this team did is, through a very creative use of kind of complicated particle physics, they were able to essentially use the gas that they shoot the laser through to make the laser. I guess it's hard to explain. I tried to read the paper. It's above my head, and I did chemical engineering. So the point is not to understand the whole process that they did, but that method that they used of shooting lasers through a very specific gas and having that gas do a very specific thing, that was creative because it hadn't been done like that before. Like, people didn't know that when you, like, shot a certain frequency laser through this certain gas, then its electrons would get kind of pulled away and then kind of bounce back. And it's that bouncing back motion of the electron that actually is what's shooting a laser out. And because that process is like an atomic scale thing, it happens faster than we could make any button on a laser work. So I guess people who use that technology after the fact, maybe not so creative. But the first person to be like, what if this?
Heck yeah.
I give them a lot of credit. So
Absolutely. But any closing thoughts on creativity?
I'll say this. I was in a chat, stream chat for Mortal Kombat, and for some reason there was a guy in there just woe is meing, very sad. I told him to get some help. But also my advice to him was to create your own world to live in, and it's only escapism if you do it wrong. Which, I mean, that's my own quote, maybe not the best advice, especially if he's got bad mental health. The point I was trying to make is that creativity can be the thing that gets you outside of whatever you're feeling is very wrong with your life or wrong with the world or whatever your situation is. That process of making something that isn't already there is very powerful, and use it to the best of your ability.
Absolutely. We'll find a better way to phrase it. Something that's a little bit less like cut yourself off from everyone and everything and just live in your own little reality. We'll work on a better
That's
phrasing.
why I gave the clarification that it's escapism if you do it wrong. I didn't say what right is. I just told him, like, hey, this could go very, very wrong. So I put my little caveat in there.
Yep, so we'll workshop it.
We'll come back to it, okay? Hopefully he takes the best version of that advice and not isolates himself in a fantasy world based around, I don't know, some fictional property.
Probably My Little Pony. There are a lot of people who use that one.
Yeah, no, that is not what you should be creating, okay? That's already created. But this has been a check-in episode of Our Public Therapy with Joe Jason and Harold Owens. We publish these every other Monday on Spotify. The videos go up on YouTube, so check out Our Public Therapy, both on Spotify and YouTube. And till then, thanks for coming.